magically appear. All right, so I think it is still afternoon. You guys, nobody's farther away than Kansas, right? Everybody's in Kansas, so good afternoon to everybody. My name is Lisa Sanders. I'm the Director of Science and Technology at Special Operations Command. I often tell people it's one of the top 5 jobs in the Department of Defense. I'm very blessed to have the opportunity to do a lot of very interesting things. What I'm planning on talking to you all today about is specifically about our Small Business Innovative Research Program, and primarily about the activities we've been doing, frankly, since March, under authorities that we were granted in the FY20 National Defense Authorization Act. And then I do have at the back of the material just some general areas where SOCOM utilizes small business innovative research in ways that we think are unique, and some of how we think others might be able to. It's not because we have different authorities, it's just the way we think about it. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So if anybody that does have the slides, I am going to move on.
Lisa, I'll look real quick if Mindy, I know I have them.
This is what I received. Is this correct?
Oh no, you're not supposed to have that.
Okay, that's what I got.
Okay, pretend you don't have that.
Okay. Yeah, that was all I received.
Lisa, do you want to use? I think that's what you sent me too.
I sent that to you? Oh my gosh, I am very sorry if that's what I sent you, because that is totally not what I meant to send you. All right, I'm just going to...
The slides that you gave me a while ago, can you use those?
I could, but that wasn't really what I was intending to do. Unfortunately, and I apologize, here's the inside the fun world of DoD. We cannot use Zoom inside of DoD. We have to use Zoom Gov, which is difficult for you all to use. So I am in a totally different space than I live in, because we have a commercial internet drop in some places, and that's where I'm at. I will send you to share with the group after the meeting what these slides are, and I will talk to them, and I do apologize, because I know how hard it is to just listen to somebody talk and try to grasp that. So what I will try to do is hit the points and then stop and open the floor for questions. And again, I use Teams a lot more than I use Zoom, but there's a chat function, right? So if somebody wants to put a question in chat off to the side, that can help keep me on track when I lose you. Does that sound like a plan?
Yep.
That's good.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So just so you know, what Mindy was popping up there was my actual report that I have to send to Congress on what we've done this year, which is a draft report that obviously I've been working frantically on. So, anyhow, it will be published eventually. It's just not published yet. All right. So back to where we are. So the reason that actually, thanks to Lori Moncrief, who suggested that I come and talk to you, Lori and I, gosh, 2.5, 3 years ago, started talking about the concept of where did we see some constraints with our SBIR process that we thought were held up in a way that legislation can help us with. And at the time, Lori was involved with a outreach innovation entity that happened to be the parent company of our partnership intermediary agreement. Several people, I imagine, have heard of SoftWorks or AFWorks, or there's a lot of works that are out there. So our specific one is Special Operations Forces Works, SoftWorks. And they had a great relationship and enterprise and ecosystem that they had developed of disruptive thinkers that, generally speaking, would meet the definition of small business innovative research. They were less than 500 people. They were small dollars, but a lot of them worked in the startup side of things. And so they didn't have all of the framework and the structure that a traditional cyber firm would have. And so when we started talking to them about, well, hey, you guys are eligible for this unique funding, this SBIR funding that I'm presuming most people on the phone are familiar with, they're like, yeah, but there's this bureaucracy we have to go through, and I don't have a cost accounting system, and I don't want to go get, all of these different hoops to jump through. And oh, by the way, even if you do that, it's kind of slow. And so we're just really not that interested, because we could do other things faster to make, to move forward. So they weren't interested in it. So we said, well, gee, could we utilize the power of that partner intermediary to overcome the bureaucratic hurdles and to reduce the amount of time it would take to get a concept to a prototype? Those were the two objectives that we had. And the first thing I did is went and talked to the Small Business Administration and said, why can't I give money to this nonprofit, my partner intermediary, and let them pass that money on to the small business? It meets the intent, right? All of the money goes to the small business. They are innovative. They fit all the constraints. The problem is that the law for SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research, requires that the SBIR funds be awarded to the small business. And that, and the number depends upon whether it's SBIR versus SITR, how much of that percentage actually has to be spent by the small business, but the contract has to go to the small business. And I was wanting to give my contract to this nonprofit, and then the nonprofit would do a business-to-business contract. So in order to overcome that, we wrote a legislative proposal, which is permission from Congress to try something new to see how it works. So we began in FY18 to do that. What we didn't realize that when we started this conversation in FY18, that the earliest we were going to have that be effective was a year later. It turned out that we were really close to the FY19 cutoff, and we couldn't get people to understand the process in 19. So in 20, we got the authority. So the language is in the FY20 congressional legislation. It's titled Technology Transfer Partnership Intermediary Authority, or something like that. It's Section 851. And what it does is allows us to spend up to 5% of our budget, of our SBIR budget, or $2 million, whichever is greater, through our partner intermediary. We wanted 10%. 10% was about $2 million. When we went through negotiations with Congress, they were concerned that if we put 10%, that could be read as 10% of DOD's budget. And that was a lot of money. So we basically, to get it through for the first year, we said, let's just put a cap of $2 million. That's about 10%. If somebody really wants to play around with numbers and figure out a way to do this, well, let's say 5%. But we were concerned that 5% of our budget wouldn't give us a phase 2. It was going to give us 3 phase 1s, and that was it. And that didn't make a lot of sense for us. So we got the authority. Questions about that before I go on?
Lisa, could I interject one thing?
Yeah,
and this is just for the SBDC counselors that participated the other week. One of the things that we did is make sure to get assistance from the Office of Advocacy out of SBA. I had educated the folks on the value of the Office of Advocacy. And since we wanted to get this through Congress, it's always a good thing to include the advocacy office in those discussions, which Lisa and her team did. So I just wanted to again emphasize how important SBA advocacy can be. So Lisa interacted with John Williams at SBA, the administration side, and she interacted with advocacy on the SBA side, both. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I just had that discussion with this group the other week. So
Yeah, no, that's a really good good put, because, and that was a good tip that Lori shared with me to make that happen. The other thing that, because we are a component under the Department of Defense, that was important to do was to work through the Department of Defense's Office of Small Business Programs, because just like SBA does that for the overall federal government, Office of Small Business Programs needed to be aware and tracking of that because of the DoD element of it. And frankly, that was why we didn't get it in 19, is it just takes time to have people come to understand and build the advocacy to support you. And then the last piece that made it difficult was that because this is small business innovation money on behalf of a DoD Defense Department entity, the normal congressional advocates that we have are not actually, they don't have the final authority to give the approval. We normally do things with the House Armed Services Committee and the House Appropriations Committee and their corresponding Senate entities, which is 4 committees. Small business is run out of small business committees, and those are not the same staff members, they're not the same Congress people. And so we were building advocacy through the Defense Department, and when we were briefing them, they're like, well, this is great, but you know the Small Business Committee is who actually has to approve this, unless they give their authority to us. And that's what actually happened, because, and the Small Business Authority doesn't always get approved every year. Because that's a different, the budgets go in different budget acts. And so it turned out that the small business committees did delegate the authority to the defense committees, and the defense committee wrote it in the Defense Act. And that's what we actually got approved with. So the takeaway for you on the phone is, if you're trying to do things that are unique, recognize that there are a myriad set of stakeholders that might shift depending upon what the Congress people that are on the committees are interested in. And we sort of had a very, within the red zone holdup, because the committeeship, I think it was in the Senate side, if I remember correctly, was turning over because in 18, if you remember, the House or the Senate had some change in leadership, and the House flipped. So maybe it was the House side where the leadership flipped, and the previous chair had felt like those things that I was saying we were going to overcome with this, they had overcome with previous legislation. And so we had to have a whole bunch of conversation about, well, why couldn't I use Senator so-and-so's legislation to achieve what we wanted to achieve? So just know that there is a lot of negotiation that happens. And so that advocacy office is really helpful. And then finding people who understand the congressional staffers and committees is really important as well. I saw a question come up in chat as well that I think asked about nonprofits and their pass-throughs and whether that was going to take away from the money available. Is that about what that said?
Yeah, Lisa, if you want me to answer that, since I was the executive director of that program. The program that SOCOM established does not charge small businesses whatsoever. It is a partnership intermediary agreement, and there is no annual dues, no fees. Some of the OTAs that are out there, which actually the contract that SOFWORKS was under is a PIA. It is a form of an OTA, but it is not a fee-based organization. They absolutely do not charge small businesses. So the money that Lisa gave them was a complete pass through to the small businesses.
Yeah, Celeste, you wonder, well, how do they stay in business? How do they turn the lights on? How do they pay their people? We had a contract that paid that partner intermediary, but we didn't use SBIR funds, and the small business was not asked to pay for any of that. That was part of my overhead administration costs, and we paid for that out of my other budget that I have. So, all right, I want to move on. The next chart that I have, I'm not going to belabor it. You guys can all see it, and if you have questions about it, Lori is actually one of the best people to talk to about it. I have a chart that explains the SOFWORKS Partnership Intermediary Agreement, what it does, et cetera. The one takeaway to be aware of from that, our perspective is using that ecosystem that Softworks had developed with technology developers, entrepreneurs, non-traditional entities. So I don't want you to think that this is just even small business. This includes, you know, two guys in their garage shop that are truly entrepreneurs, and they fit the definition of small business, but they're not traditional small businesses. This also can be, you know, people that are still in universities and haven't spun out yet into their own entity. The value for us is that ecosystem gets divergent thoughts against technology problems, and they're interested and motivated by hard problems and interesting challenges. And so one of the big attractions for us is that I have a very hard time transferring funds to somebody that doesn't fit a normal company definition, especially if I'm trying to do a normal government contract, because there's just a lot of barriers, you know, that I'm sure you all run into with your clients on a regular basis. Hey, look, I don't even know how to go certify that I haven't used Chinese materials in what I'm doing, you know, or how do I even build standard pricing rates, you know? I don't know how to do that. I can't get DCAA, the audit agency, to come in here and do that form, you know, to sign off on me, because I don't have a contract yet. And until I have a contract, I can't get rates, you know, this whole catch-22 that happens when people are starting in this business. So working through that partner intermediary, as long as they have a way to take any sort of contractual element, which could just be a check with a paper contract, our partner does a tailored business-to-business contract with them. So we do our award to the partner, and the partner does a business-to-business contract. The caveat for this money, the SBIR money, is that their business-to-business contract had to flow down all of the normal SBIR protections, that the company owned their intellectual property, and they could pass that on if they sold it. That the company had the rights to sole source for any logical follow-on. It didn't have to be recompeted. All that had to get written in the business-to-business subcontract, and so we did that in partnership with DefenseWorks under the Softworks brand. And so that business-to-business contract, once we established that, it became very, very simple. So what happened? I mentioned March, but I also said FY20, and those of you that have been around the federal business for a while know that our fiscal year starts in October, so how come it took us to March? Well, this was New Start, and you may remember that last year was not a year where we had a full budget start at the beginning of the fiscal year. So we didn't even get authority until they passed the legislation in February. And so from February to March, we were working out, all right, what kind of what kind of language did we have to put in place? Did they really mean it? Is it in here? Did they give us permission? There was a lot of that. So beginning in March, we began working that, got the money allocated, and put out a call through the normal SBIR topic call. We happened to do SBIR 20.1. I mean, it didn't matter which one we did, but that's what we did. And we put out specifically a topic that said, we are going to be awarding this through this authority, through our partner. So we announced it in the SBIR call. At the same time, our partner broadcast that topic call out to their industry and their ecosystem. And so we kept that process was a parallel process. The traditional SBIR process and the pilot ran in parallel during the announcement. So that added time, because it takes 60 days to get through and get things back, and we couldn't cut that short. So our clock ticked from March, when we announced the topic, to the end of May, when the topic closed. And then people submitted their white papers and their solicitation proposals against topic 20.1. We got some through the ecosystem, and we got some through FedBizOps. And we compared the two of them and chose to award all three of our phase 1 topics through this authority. And we awarded one direct to phase 2 topic through this authority. So metrics, and you guys will see this when I send the slides to you, but we had a 200% increase in proposals And 2/3 of those proposals came in from non-traditional small businesses. So historically, a similar topic that we had awarded the previous year had 19 proposals. We had 39 proposals against this. And then the magic really happens. Okay, so we got these very different ideas for things. And because those businesses were not traditional small businesses, and because we did the business to business contract, we actually placed them on contract in 4%, 4 singular percent of the amount of time that it normally takes us to place that contract. So if you even include the part where we couldn't shrink that down, we made an 80% improvement over our historical average. So this, and that's what draws business in. And that's just the beginning of the story, because that was the phase one. Now, because this is the first time, most of them, went ahead and took the 4 months to turn around their phase one deliverable to move to phase two. But they don't have to. So because we're doing this under this authority, it's our vision that as we go forward with our future topics, that those phase ones are a 2-month phase one. Because what they're really doing is writing a proposal in a phase one. And then we can go straight to a phase two. And we made that same 90+% improvement in contract lead time for the phase one to phase two. So of the 3 phase ones that we awarded, we have now, so that was, I told you we started in May. We awarded that contract in July. July? No, that's not right. We awarded in May. So we announced it in March, we awarded in May. And then in July, late July, we put on another task order to Defense Works to go to phase twos. Now, if you start adding up the math here, I told you I did a direct to phase two and I did 3 phase ones, and that's about $2 million. And I told you I only had $2 million of authority. So in order to not wait for the next tranche of money, we augmented the SBIR funds with non-SBIR funds, which all of you that are smart counselors know that that is legal to do. You can augment with non-SBIR. So we took baseline funds and moved 2 of those phase one topics into phase two and awarded those in single-digit days. And those contracts, I believe, were awarded in August. So they finished up in July, got their turnaround proposal to us. We went through the business-to-business contract, and then they were on contract in August. And now they're both on track to deliver their prototype within 12 months of that August award. So SOCOM's historical average, which is substantially faster than most other DoD entities, is about 5 years from the time that we do a topic to the time that we make a phase 3 decision. My objective is under this authority to be in less than a 2-year window for that, to be able to turn us to phase 3 in less than 2 years, which is the normal business cycle of a startup or an entrepreneur. So that's a 60% reduction in the time from TRL 3 to TRL 7. Questions?
If I could just add again, what Lisa has and her team have just done a phenomenal job. They are committed to shorten the length of time from the time that the topic is announced to when money gets awarded, to shorten the time from when the money is awarded to the end of phase one, instead of that being dragged out, and then to shorten the time of phase two. The other thing that I will say about SOCOM that is awesome is they stay very, very close to what technologies are needed. They work hand in hand with understanding the needs in theater with their warfighters. And so they are very close to the customer, I would say much more so than most commands. And so for those of you, I would encourage you to encourage your folks to keep an eye out for SOFWorks website and SBIR announcements, and know that I did a sampling of amount of time from a report on who awards quickly. I would venture to guess that SOCOM will be right up there with some of the new Air Force SBIR awards in a quick amount of time. And then hats off to SOCOM. Again, they do a great job of bringing technologies to program a record. I can't remember where SoftWorks was when I left, but I think they had done 8 or 9 programs a record. We're started working with a small business and helping those businesses get an actual acquisition contract.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
That's
So,
SOCOM.
Lisa, question. How many proposals did you see? Did you tell that versus how many you awarded?
Yes, we saw 39 and these were the phase ones. We saw 39 and we awarded 3.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
yeah, and like I said, that was a substantial increase, 200% over what we saw for the pilot topics. I want to make a couple of adjustments because you guys will get the slides and you'll catch me because I didn't have the right slide up in front of me that actually had the dates and I was going off my memory. I know the number of days was right. I was off a little bit as I was starting to do the math. I knew something was wrong there. Okay, so we actually put out the proposal the 1st of March. We awarded the phase 1s the 1st of April, or in early April. That was a 4-month period of performance. And then we turned those and awarded the phase 2s the end of August. I knew the end of August we awarded, so I was a little off on the beginning when I was thinking that we didn't put the call out until March. It was February 29th, so it really was March 1st. And we went on contract for the phase 1s the first part of April. So that's where those reductions were. All right, so the other thing I wanted to talk about, so what are we doing from here? Because you guys live in the small business world, you may be aware that the SBIR authority actually expires the end of 21. So when I wrote the legislative proposal, I couldn't do a full super long legislative proposal because I could only go as long as SBIR was authorized. So I have got now in the system a request to extend this authority along with the SBIR extension. So we've requested to continue the authority in the FY22 authority. We are asking that they expand that back up to the 10%. And what we are also asking is that right now the language is extraordinarily restrictive. It says US SOCOM is authorized to, with US SOCOM dollars. All right, so my SBIR dollars, the 22-ish million a year that I get, I can spend, right now 5% or $2 million. If I even bump that to 10%, it's $2.2 million, about maybe 2.5 if I have a big year. All right. What we would like is that SOCOM, because of all the reasons that Lori talked about, which I'm going to come back to in just a second, we get a lot of other people's SBIR money. Typically, we at least double, if not triple, our SBIR available funds because OSD, Air Force, Navy, Department of Health, or Defense Health Agency give us typically their expiring SBIR funds in order to execute against SOCOM requirements because we have such good relationships with our users, because we have such good topics, because people want to work with us. So what I would like to do, and my vision when I put this language together, was that not only could I spend 10% of my money, but I could spend up to 10% of Air Force SBIR dollars, which Air Force has, we have, as I said, about $20 to $22 million. They have $1.4 billion of SBIR. Okay, so 10% of $1.4 billion is way more money than I can spend, right? So that was my objective. I also have no problem with any of the other services taking advantage of this as well. They would have to work through a partner intermediary. The language says you have to have a partner intermediary that does this for you. And the language is written that 100% of the dollars from the SBIR program go to the small business. So that other entity, let's say the Air Force decided that they wanted to do this, which they probably won't right now because they're perfectly happy with what they're doing with their super SBIRs, and they've got a lot of initiatives that are out there. But they could work through they could work through the efforts that they have with AFWorks. They could work through the Wright Brothers Institute. They have several PIAs that they could use to do that. They would just need to put them on task to do it. So that's the request that we have going through the legislative proposal process, which right now is going into the Defense Department for the Defense Department to roll up. Then it goes from the Defense Department to the Office of Management and Budget to be considered across the federal entity before it goes to Congress with the FY22 budget, which happens a year from now. So all this stuff takes a long time, but we are looking to expand that authority in FY22. Questions about that? Because the last thing I was going to talk about was general SBIR lessons learned that we had and other ways that we work.
Let's see.
Okay. All right. So let me move on. And Lori, even though apparently I didn't send you my slides, you read my slides, because my other SOCOM SBIR lessons learned are the top thing is that give people good, relevant problems. And the way that we determine relevant problems is that our users are involved. And I spent 20 years of my career as a Navy civilian working in a normal Navy program office. And I thought I talked to my user, but compared to what I do here at SOCOM, I had lots of cutouts between me and my user community. At SOCOM, we are structured, first of all, we're flat and we're small, okay? A lot of people think we have special authorities and lots of money and all that. We don't have any of that, but we're flat and we're small. And so we have a lot closer relationships to that. So some of my SBIR topics are literally written by the Green Beret who came back from his last deployment and said, wouldn't it be great if X? And, you know, and we flesh out those problem statements and turn those into something that can go into a request for, you know, an RFI, or request for proposal. We might run it through, you know, one of the innovation hubs to explore what's the art of the practical. We may bring people's, you know, prototypes in and let them kick the tires and fly the drones and play with it a little bit and say, okay, you know, you got to paint it green, put the handle on the left side and make it half as heavy and last twice as long, and I'm happy with it, you know, and that'll help us. Well, is that technically feasible? Does that break the laws of physics? You know, okay, well, I can make it last 50% or 25% longer. I can't make it last twice as long. Oh, well, I'd really like it to be, you know, twice as long, but 25% is better than that. And it's, you know, or no, really, no kidding, it has to be half as big, because, you know, if I'm carrying this, then I'm not carrying bullets and water, you know, so sometimes they can't give. So we work that with our users. That is a unique thing that SOCOM does. You don't have to physically come to Tampa or go to Fort Bragg to have those relationships. Lori already mentioned the SOFWorks ecosystem, especially in the area of COVID, the vast majority of what we're doing, we're putting out virtually. We do prize challenges on a regular basis, and about half of the people that compete for the prize challenges are not physically in Tampa. They pitch over the equivalent of Zoom, and users are sitting all around. Some of them are deployed, and they're online looking at these ideas and giving us their assessments. So relevant problems, user involvement, that first of all makes interesting problems, and that brings interesting technologists to the table. The other thing that it does is helps you have a confidence that if you actually succeed, that somebody will do something with it. It's not going to go sit on a shelf gathering dust, or, you know, be awarded a prize, which is interesting, but doesn't actually give capability in the hands of the warfighter. Our warfighters are involved through the whole process, and better have some thick skin, because they'll tell you your baby's ugly, right? But they are involved. Questions about that?
Okay.
Okay. So how do we get the ideas? Because, you know, at the end of the day, it's interesting that the warfighter wants it, but he can't like whip out a credit card and pay for it, right? We do eventually need to run it through the system. So that's the other super secret sauce that makes SOCOM SBIR very successful, is that our small business innovation research projects, our SBIR projects, whether they're a pilot or whether they're a traditional SBIR projects, 95% of them are run by the program managers in the programs of record. These are not lab projects. These are not run by people whose job it is to do SBIR. These are run by people whose job it is to meet the warfighter requirements, and they have the budget, they have the requirements document, they have the authority, and they have the sustainment infrastructure, and all of those things that kill small businesses because they hit this dreaded valley of death. Those are not present with us. And so what we do is we sort of dangle this as a carrot. Hey, look, here is your free risk reduction RDT&E money. Your cost to get it is that you have to run the program, and if it works, you have to show me where you're going to insert that into your program of record. So this comes back to the flat, small organization. Most of the services, SBIR offices, they're not connected with their program offices. They're in a totally different part of the entity. They're in an AFRL. They're out there in an academic institution if they're STTR. I sit and I literally meet with the program executive officers every single weekday morning. So if there's a problem where they told me they were going to do this and it doesn't happen, this isn't I have to go introduce myself to them. This is a regular ongoing activity. So that's really, really helpful. And we have now gotten to the point, this is part of why we can spend that other people's money so fast, is that we have way more problems that are relevant problems than we have budget to meet. And so the people are competing to get our SBIR funds. So that's really important. And then the last thing is we're real big believers in harvesting good ideas no matter where they come from. So one of the first things we do when people come to us with, I'd really like to do this with SBIR, is we query the SBIR database. And we find out, has anybody else done a phase 1 on this? We hit some hiccups when they did the legislation that limited how many phase 2s you could do off of a phase 1, but it didn't stop us. And right now, using the pilot authority, as a matter of fact, I'm one of my direct to phase, it's not a direct, it looks like a direct phase 2 for me, because I'm taking an AFWERX phase 1 and going straight to phase 2 with it. So that gets us faster responsiveness to our warfighters as well. So those are kind of our 3 lessons learned: partnerships with the program offices versus the labs, picking relevant problems in that relationship to the users, and take the good ideas no matter where they come from. Those are kind of the 3 big lessons learned. All right, it looks like I have another question that's popped up, but I can't see the question, so somebody's got to read it to me.
I can read it. Can we submit an unsolicited proposal under this?
Right now, we are not doing that. I am very bandwidth limited. When and part of the, and I laugh about the Air Force system because I am an Air Force civilian now. Like I said, I was a Navy civilian for 20 years. I've been an Air Force civilian for 13 now. And I'm really super enthused about what Dr. Roper and the team are doing with the AFWERX SBIR activity. I think it's tremendously exciting. And I wish I had the bandwidth that they have. I do not have the bandwidth that they have. So right now, I would love, if I had my perfect world and I had the structure to be able to do it, I would love to do the kind of open topic that you see in the Air Force, which says, you give me your idea of what you think could solve my problems, and just convey my problems. And I do that with I also manage the rest of the SOCOM S&T budget. So I do have some generic language like that in the rest of the SOCOM S&T budget. But for SBIR, I don't have enough bandwidth to do it. I have one person who handles administrative stuff, one person that handles the database. I have a full contracting officer and part of another contracting officer. And the Air Force has 100+ contracting officers to do their SBIRs. So because of that, I just don't have the bandwidth to take what you would think of as an unsolicited proposal. In the future, I might. I'm really, if I thought I exploded when, I just hit the ecosystem with a topic of 200%, I think if I put an unsolicited one out there, we just couldn't handle it. And then we're not responsive to you. And that's what we don't want you to do, is waste time on things that we're not going to be able to take action on. Okay, looks like there's a second question.
I understand that direct to phase 2 is open. Pardon my ignorance. Is that correct? And wanted to know the deadline for that.
I would tell you to go to the SBA page, and the SOCOM topics are on the general DoD SBIR page. We're not, that's part of how we can continue to do this. That initial announcement for anything that we do is going to be done both inside the system and through the pilot at the same time. I already told you I'm out of money. I spent the FY20 authority, and you'll see this when you get the chart. So I had $2 million of SBIR that I did. I augmented that by $3.5 million. So we're in about the percentage that Air Force is doing with their matching Super Sippers, where we're doing almost 2-to-1 external funds matching into the SBIR funds. So I awarded 3 more phase 1 topics, the 2 phase 1 to phase 2s, the Air Force to phase 2, and I have 1 more phase 2 I'm trying to award with that. Then I'm going to do 3 topics in October, phase 1s. And so we're rolling through. Will there be a 20.3? SOCOM historically used to only participate in 1 of the calls because we had such a limited bandwidth. I don't like having to wait and not see ideas, so we're continuing to try to roll, but I can't commit for sure that we're going to have something on this pilot. Well, I can tell you I will not have something on the pilot in every call unless I get authority to use other people's money, which isn't going to happen until 22 at the very earliest, because I just don't have enough money to do that. And what's happening is this, if this becomes too successful, it starts cutting into my baseline program, and that's fine to some extent, because what we're finding, and we're encouraging this, is that small businesses don't only have to do SBIRs. Small businesses can support all of our problems, but I also have a plan and a prioritization for my portfolio, and if I pull some of them off to do this, then that affects that. So it's a resource limitation, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's time, sometimes it's energy. So we're in a little bit of all of those. Okay, any other questions?
I just again want to emphasize, so as I'm working with Alan and we're working out processes for the SBDC counselors, one of the things we're going to add is to make sure to keep an eye on the SOFWERX website and SOCOM's SBIRs, because they're expedited. We'll look out for Lisa's pilots. And Lisa may think she's done with working with me, but she's not. That was a good reminder for me, Lori. The other thing I was going to encourage you, we do a lot on social media. I am not as good as Emily Harmon. I would love to aspire to be as good as Emily Harmon about communicating on the social media system. But whenever we do a call, I push it on my LinkedIn. So feel free to follow me on LinkedIn, send in a request, unless you look like you're from a country that I'm really, really worried about, or you're like a business developer guy. Like I've recently been getting let me talk about how I can build your investment portfolio. I'm like, no, you really don't want me on LinkedIn. But everybody else I usually accept. So if you guys hit me up on LinkedIn, I'll accept you. And then, like I said, every time that we have an announcement, an open topic, I push I don't write it. I tell my team, like, go write me a LinkedIn note, and it gets pushed out. So can I share my link for LinkedIn? Yeah. Lisa is very dedicated and totally understands the challenges. And she just doesn't understand it. She's like, Lori, what can we do to fix this? So it's, it's refreshing to have folks that are willing to listen and willing to understand what small businesses' challenges are, and then willing to step out there and do pilots to improve upon it. And I would say SOCOM's a great organization. They have both, and Lisa said this, but just to understand, they're one of the only organizations that has R&D and acquisition authority.
Yeah, so, yeah, we have the full range.
Right.
And you know, of everything. And so that's part of, and for those of you that are going to be on the Innovation Week next week, I'm not going to steal my thunder for that, but I'm going to talk a lot more about the broad portfolio we have and kind of our interest areas. And you will see, you often hear people refer to, well, you know, I have to make these comparisons between apples and oranges. I joke that I have refrigerators and apples and cars and, you know, I have all kinds of different things. The answer to whoever said sharing my LinkedIn information, if you Google Lisa Sanders SOCOM, it will come up. I'm the only Lisa Sanders. Do not confuse me with the Lisa Sanders diagnosis unknown lady, because she looks a little bit like me. That's not me. I have had people reach out to me on LinkedIn thinking I was her, but no. But Lisa Sanders SOCOM, I'm the only one out there.
So where sometimes you run into commands that you have a technology and they don't know how to connect you to the acquisition authority, that is not the case in SOCOM. They are interconnected, they interact with each other, and they can get to that acquisition authority very easily. So I just want everybody to understand that is a big difference with SOCOM.
Yeah, literally, again, as I said, 20 years as a Navy civilian, and I am in the big Air Force system, and I've actually spent time on the air staff in the Pentagon. I am, you know, less than 150 footsteps from my desk to the acquisition executive, the person who signs all of the authority. And he delegates the vast majority of this stuff down to the lowest possible level. As a matter of fact, I have individual authority to do everything in my portfolio. I do not have to request authority for anything in my portfolio. And so, and then if we want to do something like this kind of a pilot request, that's the Commander U.S. SOCOM, the 4-star, of which there's not that many of. And he is about add another couple hundred steps from Mr. Smith's office over to his office. And again, regular ongoing communication. And so that's a big part of it, what makes SOCOM have the ability to do the things that people think of when they think of rapid acquisition to support warfighter needs. All right, well, I appreciate you all's time. And for those of you that are going to be on the Innovation Week next week, I hope I won't bore you, because I'm going to mention this, but I'm not going to mention it nearly in the depth that I'm talking about it here. And if you reach out, if you got questions that you didn't get a chance to ask or you think about them later, I also answer when people send me messages on LinkedIn. I know a lot of people are like, wow, I was really surprised you answered me. I'm like, well, until I can't do it anymore, that's what I'll do. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.